thank you for bearing with us, everybody, whilst we just got set up there. As I'm sure you know, this is the first time we've done a live podcast, so it's really, really exciting times for us. But with that, of course, comes a little bit of troubleshooting, which is what we just got through there. But I'm glad to say now I have my three guests with me today. So I'm Lawrence. Hopefully most of you know me by now. I'm the host of Giant Talk, the world's first OKR podcast, alongside the guys at Koan. And I'm glad to announce that Matt, the founder of Koan, is actually here with us as one of our guests. Hey, Matt.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Very glad to have you. Where are you calling in from today?
From Palo Alto, and it's actually sunny today, which it hasn't been for a while. So things are looking up.
Good. Well, we even have sun in Manchester today, would you believe it? So it's not all bad. And Brett, where are you phoning in from today?
I'm calling in from Toronto, Canada. So like Matt and Manchester, we've got bright sunshine, but here we're sitting at about 0 degrees Celsius, which might be the difference.
Yeah, okay. So quite a bit for you. So hopefully most of you recognise Brett's lovely voice as well. He is the founder of PM Squared Consulting, based over in Canada, but he's been guest on many podcasts before, so I'm sure you all know him. And last but by no means least, Roger, where are you at?
Oh, I'm in sunny Manchester, and I'm really pleased to be able to say that we have better weather than Canada. Good grief. That's amazing.
Yeah, so hopefully you also all know Roger, head and founding Giant, of course. The guy that I have to suck up to make sure I get my paycheck at the end of the month. And, so, guys, thank you so much for joining us. I'm sure everyone knows what we're going to be talking about today. We do have a functionality to welcome questions in. Hopefully you guys have got a chat button on your screen. Feel free to enter the questions on there. But if for some reason that's not working, just tweet them to us. Tweet using the hashtag Giant Talk, and I'll make sure that I'm keeping a close eye on that. So hashtag Giant Talk on Twitter, and we'll of course be more than happy to take any questions that you guys feel to us as the show goes on. But of course, we're here to talk about coronavirus and COVID-19 that's been affecting the world for a few months now, but has really ramped up over the last couple of weeks. And of course, first thing first, hope you and all your families are well. But it is going to have an impact on OKRs, and OKRs are an interesting thing to have during this time. And I think it's only right that we discuss them and we discuss the impact it's going to have. And how you can use them and continue to use them to have an awesome impact for your teams whilst everybody's working remotely in isolation. So I guess that's where we'll kick off, guys. Roger, I'm gonna turn to you first, if I may. Why is it important to keep remote workers striving for something, some sort of goal within the company?
Well, this new reality that we're finding, that most of us are finding ourselves in, can be quite an isolated one. It can be one that's full of plenty of distractions, whether that comes in the form of dogs or children, or maybe the kitchen is very close and you can't stop making yourself a cup of tea because there's always something which is more interesting than the work that's there in front of you. And it's very, very easy to get blown off course and distracted. Now, I'm not saying there aren't distractions in the workplace. Of course there are. But the thing is, in the workplace, you're surrounded by people that and you can get some energy and some direction from those people. And you've kind of got a collective energy that hopefully points you in the right direction. When you're working remotely, that doesn't happen. That's got to come from you personally. But as managers and leaders, we have the opportunity to leverage goal setting to really help with that sense of direction, and also help them, obviously, with the way that OKRs are structured, understand how they're progressing towards that.
Right.
And it's I think it's a really powerful way of working with remote workers, and it's kind of backed up by a lot of the calls I've been on this week with people who have approached us saying, crumbs, we've got teams that overnight have had to go remote, and we just don't have the frameworks in place to be able to manage that. What can we do? We know we need to get better at goal management, and what can we do to do exactly that? So,
Okay, so
there's an appetite out there for this overnight, literally.
What would your answer to that question be then, Brett?
Well, I would, I agree with what Roger says, except in Canada, the temptation isn't tea; it's something more substantial like beer. But the concept's the same. I immediately go to Daniel Pink and his concepts about intrinsic rewards. Like, part of the problem with the remote workers is they need intrinsic rewards, not extrinsic. And that's the whole story of, I'm not in the office, I don't get those extrinsic feedbacks. Now, Daniel talks about 3, I kind of expand those to 5. But if we think of what OKRs offer us and those intrinsic rewards, number 1 is purpose. Let's make sure the individual understands specifically what their new purpose is in this new world. Of course, OKR is delivering that promise. Progress. Employees need that affirmation. They need to see that they're making progress on their goals and understand how they're contributing to the greater good. Again, check box for OKRs. Autonomy. People need the opportunity of making decisions for themselves and how to get work done. And this is the biggest fear of the leaders in the organization, wondering if people are making the right decisions, and the biggest power that employees get. And then finally, socialization. We need the opportunity to connect with the organization and have the right conversations. And I believe OKRs set that structure for those better performance meetings in organizations. So I'm saying the goal is part of establishing purpose, which is part of those intrinsic rewards.
Okay, so it sounds like what both yourself, Brett, and Roger are saying then is really there has to be some self-motivation going on. People really have to increase their willingness to get up, keep their focus, and do their work, basically. How can they do that?
I would say the organization has to set the stage for that to happen. The fair game is the organization needs to be clear, what are your objectives, and give individuals the tools and mechanisms to fulfill themselves against those. So where you say they have to self-motivate, I'm saying they do, but we've got to seed it. We've got to give them the right things to self-motivate against.
Okay, and presumably this is where the OKRs come in for all of us then.
Absolutely.
Okay, so let's bring this back down to reality then. Matt, have you currently got your team working remotely?
We do, of course, and we're lucky enough that we've been a partially remote working team since the inception of the company. But now we're fully remote and dealing with all those challenges and doing some of the things to try to stay connected as a team, like virtual happy hours and trivia nights. But there's all the challenge of, all right, things that were easy in the office environment, now it takes a little more rigor. So maybe just to riff off some of the comments previously, I think one thing that has been top of mind and that we've been providing some advice around is just, it turns out that the best practices of a good OKRs program become especially important when everybody's trying to work remotely and when there's so much uncertainty and so much flux out there. And so as one example, if you are an organization that is more in the mode of set and forget around your goals or OKRs,
right.
You go through the quarterly planning, write them down, put them in the spreadsheet, and then maybe talk about them a couple times per quarter. It just doesn't cut it when everybody's remote and you don't have the in-person conversations. So more structure and rigor around asynchronous feedback loops, being very careful and making sure that things are written down, and doing best practices like a weekly goals check-in where you're really making sure as a team, hey, let's check in on these. Are they on track? What do we need to do to move them forward? Definitely all in the spirit of building intrinsic motivation, and autonomy. That resonates a lot. But I think part of how you can provide that and make that real is by being very thoughtful about the structure and some of the best practices. We always all talk about is great ways to make your OKR successful, but become especially important in the context of everybody working remotely.
Absolutely. Roger, do you have any more thoughts on that?
Yeah, I would really echo in particular what Brett said, that it's down to the business or the organization to really provide the platform and set the scene in terms of what. And this is the same whether you're working remotely or you're office based, but to set the scene in terms of what's expected of their people. But it's even more important remotely because it's easier for people to become disconnected, easier for people to get distracted and drift and so on and so forth. So this is where it's kind of, I think there's a lot of managers out there that perhaps have been too comfortable, too used to command and control and micromanagement, that
Right.
all of a sudden are probably finding life rather uncomfortable because remote working and micromanagement do not really go well together at all. And in fact, you're probably likely to give yourself a heart attack if you're going to try and micromanage people remotely. And the thing is that you have to be you have to trust your people. In fact, allowing people to work remotely in itself is a demonstration of trust. We trust you not to be in the office all the time because we know you're going to get the work done. And in fact, there's actually data out there that tells us that employees feel more trusted when they are allowed to work remotely, and this all bodes so well for an approach like OKRs. And when it comes to when you look at how well-formed key results should be written, which is not about telling people what to do, it's about giving them the finishing point and allowing them to then work out how best to get there. That again is a demonstration. It's a demonstration of trust and it's a complete opposite to a typical traditional command and control approach. So that's why I think it just all works really well at the moment with the move to remote working.
So I think that's fine, to say, all right, we're gonna just set the destination that we want to get to and allow the teams to find their way there when the teams are sat together. And they're probably sat not too far away from their manager, and there can be that we're not going to, give you the step-by-step directions to get there. But if you're going too far off course, we might just sort of nudge you back on track a little bit, and that could come from a peer or it could come from a manager or anywhere. How do you make sure people don't go so far left field when they're working remotely that you end up miles away from your destination?
I think there's a check step between your first statement, what Roger's talking about in terms of making sure these goals are outcome based, so that leaders are looking for the outcomes, not the activities, and that helps, as Roger says, avoid the micromanaging. Right. But I think there's two other things you need to touch on about the goal. One is, unlike the strategy you had a month ago, this strategy has to be what Mintzberg calls a deliberate strategy. It is a specific strategy in response to a specific stimulus, COVID-19. And so it's a very different set of goals that we have than we had a month ago.
Okay, so let me just stop you there for a second, Brett. Are you saying a whole new OKR crafting exercise should go on as the first prompt here, basically?
Absolutely. We all know the definition of insanity.
Yeah, there is literally nothing worse than having goals or OKRs sitting out there in front of the whole company when everyone knows that is no longer the truth or the most important thing. There's kind of the simple rubric of, all right, are your goals and the most important things the same? And if they're not, that is exactly insanity.
Yeah, the Center for Creative Leadership says leadership the role of us as leaders is meaning making in a community of practice. It's your job to make meaning out of COVID-19 in this community of practice, being your organization. So as Matt says, it's super critically important that you change those objectives, that people understand it's a new agenda. And the type of objectives you're coming up now aren't things like, let's grab market share. Like, that's not what's appropriate in these days. So first off, a deliberate strategy. The second thing to think about is what my buddy John Doerr talks about: committed versus aspirational.
Right.
Now might not be the time to worry about aspirational goals. You might want to throttle right back and just be crisp on what are the committed goals that we're looking for.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. Completely agree with that.
Okay, so on this note then, Jen has just asked us a great question. You come into the start of this period, whether it's going to be 4 weeks, 8 weeks, 12 weeks, with an entirely remote-based team. Let's face it, none of us really know right now. What sort of length of time are you setting these new OKRs for? And are you going to start to get really short-term, incrementally focused on your cadence within that? Roger?
Well, right. Okay. I would say yes, because I don't think. I mean, typically, as most people opt for a cadence of, or certainly a cycle of 3 months with their OKRs, and perhaps the 12 months for the strategic ones. I think that let's face it, the world's changed in the past 2 weeks, let alone what it will look like in the next 3 months. So I would definitely advocate bringing them down to a shorter cycle now.
Okay, and sorry, Brett, you're going to...
Yeah, academically, here's what we know: when going gets tough for an organization, the timelines get shorter. So, your 5-year plan now is your 1-year plan. Your 1-year plan is now your 1-quarter plan. So there's no question that the drumbeat of our business, the agility that we need to build into them, is talking about timelines which are at least half of what they were. So if you thought you're going to update your OKRs once a quarter, you better plan on doing half that time, and maybe even half of that if that's not fast enough. The second part is what I'm going to call tripwires. There's got to be events that signal to the organization it's time to rethink our objectives. Now, traditionally, we just use the elapsed time. We just go, wait a quarter, enough time's passed, let's re-trigger and refresh our OKRs. But now it's going to be some other event. Either there's going to be a turn on the economy, someone's going to come up with the magic elixir, something is going to be a trigger event that is going to be the stimulus to say, okay, time to redo those OKRs. So prescription, at least twice as often as you were going to do it before. And secondly, figure out what those trigger points are and respond to them immediately.
Yeah, I think all very much resonates with me. Maybe to add to that, two approaches we've seen work well. One is just very explicitly have a different cadence than you did previously. So try monthly OKRs. If it's less than a month, then it starts to become hard for me to believe that it's actually objectives and key results versus a list of tasks to do. Sure. Sometimes you do need to just tackle a list of tasks as well when you're doing full-on emergency response. But maybe it's a monthly cadence. Alternatively, depending on your business, depending on exactly what's happening, it might still be a quarterly cadence for the OKRs, but you might need to explicitly build in some expectations on the team around we're going to revisit them monthly, we're going to update them, and exactly, there may be triggers where we're not going to wait a month. Things have changed again for us, so we're going to immediately come in and have a conversation about changing them.
Okay, interesting. Let's just get real here for a second, though. And Roger, I'm going to turn this question to you. 3 of us in this conversation are OKR consultants. We help organizations establish their OKR for a living. And in doing so, we probably also go through more Post-it notes than anybody else on this planet. How on earth do you even start to think about getting your teams to come up with some OKRs when nobody's allowed in the same room as each other? Or are we getting to the point here where actually these OKRs just have to be handed down by by management, and the employees kind of just have to deal with that.
Sorry, who's that question to?
For you.
Oh, to me. Right. Okay. Thank you. Right. I would say definitely not is it the time that you have to resort to command and control, even though the temptation will be strong. I believe that it's possible to use the online tools that are out there. There are various different ideation tools which can help you have whiteboards that you can connect, attach post-its to, and so on and so forth, which you can run in a virtual online session. Takes a bit of adjusting to, but it's absolutely possible to do it. Things like Idea Hunt. What's the one you were using a couple of nights ago, Brett? Mural. Yeah, Mural. So, there's two for starters, but I'm sure there's plenty more out there. But these tools are there, and they're there to be discovered, tried out, tested. So there are definitely ways of working collaboratively remotely. Just because you're not face to face doesn't mean you can't collaborate. And I know you're the host of this, so you might not want to necessarily share the story, but I'll share it on your behalf. I know you were working with a team of people in Switzerland on Monday and Tuesday, and how many people were online at the same time?
We had 19 of us on for that call. 19.
Okay. And would you have called that collaborative in the way that it works?
Extremely so, yeah.
Well, there you go then. I think that's a great example of how remote working can still be collaborative working.
Yeah. No, I completely... Go on, sorry.
I was going to add a couple of things. One, I would give a slightly selfish plug for Mural. They do use OKRs, and in fact use Koan to help them manage them. And I love the idea of using some new tools. It can be as simple as Google Docs, where you can see live editing. And I agree, it is possible to be very collaborative remotely. However, there's something you get in a in-person offsite meeting. You're all in the same room together. You can read their body signals, and this expectation that, hey, we can just completely replicate that just by all sitting in a Zoom call together. That doesn't quite make sense to me either. And so I do think there are things that you do to adapt. One of them is to move parts of the process to it being asynchronous whenever you can. Definitely a fan of, you still need to have the virtual meeting and go through it and make it collaborative and brainstorm. It doesn't need to be command and control. But opportunities for, hey, maybe let's move some pre-draft and pre-ideation and have people submit ideas asynchronously ahead of time, where we can write it down, and that can make it much easier to work together when you're not in the same room.
Yeah, I think, Matt, you bring up a great point, and that is meetings are different when they're online. And so things like, what you stress about preparation and asynchronous are super important. You never should do in a meeting what you can do out of a meeting. There's the purpose of the meeting is to get the right brains in the room to manufacture the right knowledge. And that happens in that constructive team environment. What does that mean? Like the ideation and that sort of thing. The second thing, cast a wide.
Oh, sorry, Brett. Sorry, Brett. You just cut out a little bit there. Please, can you just repeat that?
Sorry. So often we just cast a wide net. We hope that inside of the gaggle of people we've invited, there's someone that has the wisdom that we're looking for. We need to be far more explicit in this new world, where we make sure that if we're having a conversation about strategic goals, we have people who have the depth, breadth, and cognitive ability to have that conversation. And we need to understand who the subject matter experts are. So if someone weighs in on a topic, it doesn't necessarily become a democracy, because in these times of agile management, we need to have assurance that the decisions we make are based on the best wisdom in the room, not the average wisdom.
Right, absolutely. And I think I just, as Roger mentioned, I hosted facilitated the session the other day. There's a couple of things that I would say anyone leading that type of session really needs to look out for. One is that the person with the loudest voice, or even possibly the best internet connection, doesn't end up completely dominating the discussion, and all of their ideas are the ones that get put forward and end up getting run with. There is no reason why, if you're hosting an online facilitation session, you still can't take the time to do individual work and, sharing feedback, collecting amongst the group. And some of the tools that Roger mentioned before, Idea Hunt and Mural, will allow you to do that. But just from my point of view, it would have been very easily to let the person with the loudest voice really make sure their goals were the ones that were taken forward. Sometimes that's a leadership team, sometimes it isn't, but that is just a point of note from myself. Let's just move back into talking about routines then, guys. Do we need to be increasing check-ins? Do we need to be decreasing check-ins? Should check-ins now be run by the leadership team? Roger, I'll turn to you.
I think check-ins are more important than ever now.
Right.
As part of this move to remote working, you only have to look at all the research and all the guidance that there is around how to make that adjustment, and every single thing that I've come across all says that you need to. The habits and the routines are more important than ever, because otherwise that connection between the individual and the rest of the team, and maybe the individual and the business as a whole, starts to weaken. And part of that connection is obviously the focus on the goals. Yeah. So I think this is where the check-ins are more important than ever. Typically our clients opt for either weekly or fortnightly check-ins on the OKRs. I would say definitely at the moment minimum of weekly, and possibly even more frequently than that.
We're chatting daily, aren't we?
Sorry?
We're chatting daily.
Well, yes, we have team check-ins daily, but we're talking about activities that are contributing towards the OKRs, but we're not actually talking about the OKRs specifically themselves. We kind of cover that once a week. But yeah, I think in terms of having them, front and present in conversations on a very, very frequent basis is really important.
Thank you. Sorry, Roger. One of the three of you is just clicking on your computer at the same time as being plugged into the mic, and it's really loud through the mic. So can I just ask that you hold off for a little while? Thank you. Derle is tuning in from Brazil and has just asked a really great question in the chat. I'm not sure if you can see it. But he's asked, do you have examples from your experience of any companies that have used OKRs actually as a solution for times of crisis uncertainty like this? Anyone that's come to you in this sort of situation before to look to implement OKRs, and kind of what mindset were they in at the time and what were they trying to achieve? Brett, if I can turn to you first.
Well, certainly a burning platform is always a good focal point. What was it Churchill said? There's nothing like a good war to unify a country. We all have a clear and present danger that we need to focus on to ensure the success of ourselves, society, our employees, our companies. And it doesn't have to be a long process. Literally, a 3-hour deliberate strategy session should identify the goals. A 4-hour session on surfacing what we have more of or less of, the key results, and you're up and running. So even if you don't have an existing strategy or you don't have an existing OKR system, for the fit for purpose in this case, you can be up and running in a day or two. Now, you can make it more elegant in 5 days, and as you use it over the next month, it will even get better. But the idea is we no longer need perfection. Close enough is close enough in this world.
Right, okay. And, well, I'm sure you can't provide us with any names, but Roger, do you have any examples from who Derby Giants have worked with?
What, that have used them in distress?
Yeah, and I don't, it doesn't have to be distress like this, I don't think, but have realised that they're in a situation that they need pulling out of and have gone, okay, well, maybe OKRs are the way to do it.
So, in terms of a turnaround, yes. Okay, nothing quite akin to as Brett says, the rather unifying situation that we all find ourselves in collectively at the moment. But in terms of providing a turnaround, definitely. And what I've found OKRs do really, really well there is as we always say, they're there to bring focus and clarity to that which is going to deliver the greatest value for the business and its people. And if you're going to turn around a business, then that clarity has to be there. You can't afford for confusion because the clock is ticking, and you might be quite close to the end of the runway, and you have to turn it around before you reach the end. And having that clarity around the goals is super, super important, and mobilizing the teams that need to align into it as super important. The types of examples, to be honest, it varies from business to business, and it depends on their specific strategy. There is usually in the top level, there's usually a number somewhere that they have to achieve, which is evidence of turnaround. And then it's about breaking how you are going to achieve that number down into its constituent parts. Are you going to try and achieve it from the existing client base? Are you trying to grow the client base? Does that mean you need new products? Does that mean you need to move into new territories, open up new markets, so on and so forth? So in terms of specific examples, it's kind of very, very domain specific from business to business. But the main thing is that they bring absolute clarity if they use properly.
Right. Thank you, guys.
I was going to add one quick story from this week. In fact, been chatting with essentially hot startup. They've done multiple funding rounds with great investors and been growing the team really aggressively over the last year. And COVID-19 is affecting their business in some pretty profound ways, just like almost everybody else. So they did a big layoff last week. And the whole context for the conversations is, wow, what we got away with over the last year just won't cut it anymore. And that's things like we don't actually know what different teams are working on and whether we're working well together. We've never written down our strategy in a formal way. Every quarter, it's kind of a new priority and something different. And we don't have anything to measure progress on other than the revenue we're bringing in. So we're just not having strategic conversations. So OKRs for them have become, they don't have an OKR program yet. They're looking at rolling one out. And the whole context for that is we need this as a better way of working together to have focus, to deal with the crisis. And we kind of got away with some sloppy behavior and not really having strategic focus before. And in the good times, all the tide was raising all ships. Now things are much harder, and we have to have the disciplines around these behaviors.
Do you know what? Actually, Matt, that reminds me when I used to work in sales. My old sales manager used to say, "Anyone can sell when the markets are strong. Anyone can sell." But it takes a really good salesperson to sell when the situation is challenging, and that translates to how you lead and run the business as well. It's not just about sales, but it's about how you lead and run the business. It's like you say, lazy practice has perhaps been enough to get us through in previous years, but we are entering a different world now, aren't we?
Certainly are.
Yeah, I would embellish that and kind of link these two recent conversations together. I believe that, think of an old mechanical watch. Each gear moves at a different speed. I have some gears that move once a second, some once a minute, some once a month. In your organizations, the question was about how frequently should we meet and talk about OKRs. And the answer is it depends. Are you the second hand, the minute hand, or the month indicator? Different teams need to move at different paces. And so it's not one answer for all areas. Now, you still have to synchronize your watch. Once a month we used to meet and agree what time it was. Metaphorically, now maybe it's probably once a week, more frequent meetings. The second dimension to it is about precision. As Matt says, you've got to, if you're driving your car down a large airport runway, you can weave back and forth and never worry about hitting anything on the side of the road. Up where you live, Roger Lawrence, up in the Lake District, you have roads which are literally about a millimeter wider than the car. You've got to be really precise on how you drive in that world. We now have business runways, as Matt's describing, they're a millimeter wider than your business. You better be incredibly precise how you drive that vehicle for the next while.
That's a fantastic analogy, Brett. Thank you so much. I just want to move us on now, if that's okay, to what I believe anyway to be another one of the cornerstones of OKRs, which is transparency. And I can imagine at this time we've got a lot of leadership teams who are, firefighting, for want of a better term, and are probably having a lot of very regular conversations amongst themselves. How can they keep communication open with their employees, whether it's by OKRs or check-ins or otherwise, and actually keep them informed about what the situation is? Roger, I'll put that to you, please.
So yeah, a really good one. I would say, again, it comes down to having super clear goals and also super clear measures on progress against them, so that there can be regular, frequent updates that are done through team calls or all hands that are done virtually, so that the leadership team can keep everybody up to date. And having having a good OKR system to pull all this together.
Do we know anyone?
I don't know. I'm just trying to think of someone. I can't think of anybody at the moment. Just helps with transparency. And the beautiful thing is that when you're doing check-ins, if that check-in also includes an update of the OKRs, as it should, then the team itself has the transparency around that, and then so does the leadership, the wider business. So having a good, simple system that pulls it all together is a million times better than trying to drive it on Google Sheets.
Right.
Certainly from my experience. So I think the transparency has really helped by that.
Right. Interesting. Thank you for that. Jill,
there is that.
Go on, Matt. Sorry.
I was going to say there's this classic advice in times of crisis as a leader or CEO. It's more important than ever to be seen. And that classic way this advice goes is, all right, now is not the time to close the door to your office, but to walk around, talk to people, let you be seen. Of course, none of that works at the moment. And I think this is if you're having the Zoom calls with your leadership team or with your direct team, none of that's visible. People don't see you in the office. And this exactly is where some of the disciplines and this radical idea of OKRs, they are transparent to everyone. Everybody can see the progress. Everybody can see the updates. Of course, we think doing it in a tool can make it even easier. But whether you're using a tool or spreadsheets, the asynchronous visibility of that progress and the openness and transparency around it, that's not nearly enough. You need to be communicating beyond that and in as many different channels as possible. But making that data available to people, having it consumable asynchronously when you can't absorb it around the water cooler, that's critically important.
I always am baffled about how we bring different behaviors to work than we have in the rest of our lives. Think of playing football, soccer. You're out there in the field, you're playing forwards. You can see exactly what the midfield's doing. You can see what defense is doing. And you change what you do accordingly. If they're having a bad day, you're going to play back more. If they're having a great day, you're playing forward more. that's what we need in organizations. We need the ability to understand what the role is. What's the role of midfield? What's the role of defense? Or what's the role of sales and operations? And how are they doing? And that way you can make informed choices for yourself. You don't need the coach to tell you. You can decide while you're in the field in real time what you should start doing and stop doing. And that transparency you talk about is merely bringing what we already do. If you sing in a choir, play a sport, even online gaming, right? We need that ability to see everything that's going on to make informed choices. Now, just because I can see what defense is doing forward, that doesn't mean I'm micromanaging. I'm reflecting back on Roger's comment. You're micro-monitoring for sure. I need to see everything that's going on, but then I can decide myself what I need to do. Micromanaging is when I reach over and tell defense what they should do. No, that's their job. They figure it out. My job is to work as my part of the team. And there's an organization chart I can go through to get the message over to defense if they need to get it. So that transparency is super important. And so I would argue, Matt, in fact, managing by wandering around has never been easier, because now, instead of you having to, go around your office and bump into each one individually, you can literally, with your OKRs, visit with 50 people inside of 50 minutes. Take a look at their OKRs, find something insightful to say, give them a ping, let them know that you're there for them, you're watching them, you're coaching them, you're supporting them. You don't even have to wear your sneakers. You can sit there and just finish that one beer. Well, 50 minutes is a long time for one beer, but you can get to see people and help them feel connected super effectively with a tool in place.
That's great.
Exactly.
That's really, really, really good. Jill and Jen have asked 2 questions in the chat that I'm going to kind of tie together a little bit, actually. And I'm going to bring them together into culture, because this is something I was going to ask about. So Jill has asked about apathy to hysteria in employees during COVID-19, but mostly, can OKR check-ins be used to strengthen teams and how they reach out? Jen has asked that we know the current situation is getting out of control, but she's interested to see how the workplace is going to change after this. And both of these link to what I was going to ask you guys, and I'll start with you, Roger, is this going to have a positive or a negative impact on company culture? And what does that mean for OKRs?
Oh, yeah, that's a really interesting one. I'd certainly say that this sudden jolt is going to be, I believe, something of an awakening to a lot of businesses. The tools for remote working have been around for a good few years now, and they've been getting better and better. Mm-hmm. But only according to the last census in the US, I don't know what the data is outside the US, but the last census in the US, there was only 5% of the workforce that were working remotely.
Right.
And now, I mean, I haven't seen any data to tell me what it is now, but I would say that's probably something more like about 80%, if not more. And so I think businesses will start waking up to the fact that there's a lot of benefits to working this way. There's reduced costs potentially because they don't need so many offices. There's also potential benefits for the employees themselves because they can become more flexible, and it can better fit with their lifestyle. And also, let's not underestimate the environmental benefits. We've heard all the reports about how much less pollution there has been around over the past couple of weeks. So we shouldn't forget that as well. But in terms of the culture, I just want to kind of loop back to one of the points I was making earlier about the fact that this shift is massively challenging the old style of command and control management. Mm-hmm. To become a more empowered, trusting style of management. And I think that's how we will see a lot of cultures change. Some businesses were already there. Some businesses were already good in that respect. And unsurprisingly, they are the ones in which OKRs work best. But I think this new way of working, when businesses see that there is actually commercially some really, really strong arguments for making this more of a permanent long-term shift than a sudden short-term reaction. I think we'll start to see the cultures change because there'll be less micromanagement, there'll be more of a sense of trust, and employees will be better placed to kind of work, manage their work around their own personal commitments and their own lifestyle as well.
Okay, so what does that mean for OKRs?
Well, what it means for OKRs is OKRs become the perfect mechanism, if you will, the perfect framework for providing that guidance, direction. As Brett said quite early on, it's about the organisation laying out and in front of the workforce what needs to be achieved, so that the workforce can then work out for themselves how best to achieve it. That really knits in well with the culture of empowerment, of trust, exactly the opposite to all the traditional micromanagement that's gone on for a long time in many organisations.
Thanks, Roger. So, Brett, do you agree? Oh, sorry, was that Matt? Matt, sorry.
I was just going to chime in on that point exactly, which was, Brett and Roger, and I'm sure you guys have seen before. We certainly have, where you'll go and talk to either a company or an individual, and they'll just have a violently toxic reaction to the idea of OKRs. And the story usually goes, something like, "Oh my God, we tried those at our company, and it was just the worst. It was this massive extra set of busy work. It gave us no value. It's just a way to be under the thumb of management in a whole new way." And so it's very much any business process can be used for good or evil. I think what you said, Roger, around the positive form of OKRs, where it actually is about trust and empowerment and enabling autonomy, as we've been talking about during this chat, that has even bigger place than ever. And the companies that are going to be successful are the ones that figure out how to embrace that version of OKRs, that version of working together and building that type of culture. Because whether they want to or not, this is suddenly a new reality that we're in, not just for the next few months, but the lasting impact of everyone understanding and realizing what it's like to work remotely. And that's probably never going back. What I've been thinking about is, in some ways, take the trends of future of work that we've been on for a while now. This crisis probably accelerates all those trends by at least a few years. My kind of crazy realization moment came earlier this week, which was we have a 1-year-old and a 4-year-old at home. Our 4-year-old is normally in preschool for half days. Of course, he isn't at the moment. But what they're doing at the preschool is several Zoom meetings per day, which is just as crazy as it might sound. You have a whole bunch of preschoolers in a Zoom meeting all trying to talk at once and figure it out. But there's this crazy process over the last week, which is they are all figuring it out. And not just the preschoolers, but all the grade schoolers and high schoolers. They already know how to live in a virtual world, but we're training them very intensely at the moment around what it's like to work remotely. In the same way that we're training ourselves, those of us doing full-time work, to do it even better than we did before as well.
Absolutely.
I agree. Yeah, this genie ain't going back in the bottle. It's not only is this the rise of the OKR as a management tool, but it's the rise of all these other things that have been in play, like Zoom and so on. So on the left side of our brain, no question. But the overall question was about culture, sort of the right side of the brain. And I think that we need exactly the culture that we had before. So just copy that and then add on at least 3 more cultural attributes. What Roger's talked about, which is trust in the worker, empowerment, autonomy, and engagement. So empowerment, we have to give the power to individuals to make decisions inside of their zones of control, given as complete information as we can give them. The autonomy to make those decisions, and work specifically on building up engagement, whether It's Matt's idea of virtually managing by wandering around, or having social events through Zoom, etc. Just we need to be very specific about this. And culture is not an accident. Culture is a thing that it can happen accidentally. At a certain point in time, you form that culture, but you can also specifically manage it. And in fact, you can set up OKRs around those cultural attributes. So, for example, if we want people to be autonomous, we can measure how often they can make decisions without having to go up the organization chart. If we want them to be engaged, we can see how many people do show up for those virtual socials or provide social nudges and supports to their teammates. So I think we need to be very explicit about this at this point in time to make that culture shift and make it stick.
Absolutely. And that touches on a point that Jen's just raised in the chat here. She said, I think OKRs can be key to offering employee recognition, especially during remote working. And she thinks that employees can easily get disconnected and feel no direction in their work when they have no positive reinforcement. Is that an alarm bell that you think people need to look out for, Roger?
Yes, I do. And I think it ties in with what Brett was just saying a few minutes ago, where if people are providing updates, perhaps maybe in preparation for a check-in, it's really important that they know that those updates are being looked at, that they're being seen, that they're being acknowledged, if not, then it's going to be the typical, well, what's the point? Why am I doing this? So it's that balance between providing, the individual providing enough by way of an update, obviously not War and Peace, but enough, so that they cover the salient points, and everybody else can easily understand it, and as once they've seen it, acknowledge it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Certainly, our work is almost all transnational. So we've been doing Zoom implementations, WebEx photo meetings for the last 4 or 5 years, and we recently did one for about 35,000 people around the world. And what's interesting is we go across these different clients, the culture comes out so strongly, even more strongly in these web meetings. So we're dealing with a client now that is super supportive of everyone. And it's just so delightful to see that as we all stumble our way forwards, they're almost aggressively supporting each other as people figure out how to work in this world. 2 weeks ago, we were dealing with a client that was completely opposite. Even in the same room, they're busy throwing mud at each other. So I think as leaders, we need to coach, mentor, protect, and train to make sure that we're having the right types of conversations on the web. We've all been on email threads that eventually begin to degrade and they get quite antisocial. How is it we monitor and coach to make sure that we have the right behaviors on those environments?
Absolutely. I'm going to quickly squeeze in this last question from Jill, because I think it is superb. And I'm going to open it up by going to Roger, because I know what Roger's opinions are on individual OKRs. Jill's asked, would you suggest that now is the time for some temporary, short-term OKRs for individuals?
No, that's an interesting one, because as you know, we're not usually a big fan of individual OKRs. Yeah, I'm going to say it depends. It depends on the OKRs that are at the next level, and if there's sufficient coverage, sufficient opportunity for people to contribute and be included, and have accountability towards them, then maybe not. But if it's a case of there's quite a number of people beneath, and you need to be clearer on what an individual needs to do to make to make their contribution and to measure that and track that contribution, then perhaps there is it now.
Is there a danger, though, in doing so that, we've all been forced into remote working now, right? Is there a danger in creating these individual OKRs or asking for them to be created? But what you're saying is actually, I don't quite trust you to work enough autonomously on your own, and I need you to be reporting more tangible outputs each day. Matt, what are your thoughts on that?
I'm also not a fan of individual OKRs in general. Work gets done in teams, and as much as possible, autonomous or semi-autonomous teams. That is just the reality. And where individual OKRs often do go is, I want to micromanage you. There is another kind of version of it, which is more personal growth objectives.
Sure.
That kind of lies outside of what we typically think of as operational and strategic cadence of goals.
Agreed.
So if this is an excuse to get rid of individual OKRs in your organization, I think that's great. There are some cultures where they can work well, but in general, I'm not a fan.
Brett, anything to add on this?
Yes, certainly. I mean, research does prove that employees are far more loyal to their coworkers than their boss. And so we need to use that to our advantage to help the team perform as a team, as Matt has said. I think beyond that, as we know, feeling connected is super important, and feeling engaged is super important right now. And so by having multiple people viewing the same OKR, just law of averages, we're going to have more feedback and more conversations. And so I'm with everyone else that's spoken up so far. Now is the time absolutely to get rid of all individual OKRs and help us all collaborate for the next chunk of time.
Okay, so the answer to Joel, your question is no, this is not the time to create remote, temporary, short-term OKRs for individuals. Look, we've just hit the hour mark. It's been an amazing discussion so far. What I would love from each of you guys, and sorry to put you on the spot with this, is just one piece of advice really to give the listeners that they can take forward into this time for what to do about their OKRs and getting their teams working remotely with them over the next 12 weeks. Roger, come to you first.
Yeah, well, there's a little strap line that we've been using this week, isn't it? With the temptation with OKRs right now is to go, oh, we haven't got time for those. All this stuff is happening over here, and everything's changing, and the other. Pivot them, don't park them. OKRs can still be the framework by which you bring focus to the business, and focus is more important than ever right now. So yes, you need to change what's in your OKRs. Yes, you might even need to change the cadence of them and how you're reporting against them, how you're checking in against them. But they are there as the framework to execute your strategy, whether you're in a distress situation like we find ourselves now, or whether life is a little bit calmer.
Right.
So yeah, that's what I would say.
Thanks, Roger. Matt?
The number of times I repeat, you have too many goals. I don't know if I had a nickel for each of those times. So that would be my one tidbit is it's always important advice to have radical focus through OKRs and not use it as an excuse to say we're working on everything. In a time of crisis, that is way more important than ever. So, and focus on less, chop down that list of objectives and key results, use it as an opportunity to focus everyone on what's most important and how to move the needle on your business.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. And last but not least, Brett?
Well, when asked for one, I'll always ante up three. So I would say the three are, one, create alignment and focus. Two, build that community, build that virtual community, your virtual organization. And three, establish that cadence of accountability.
Fantastic. There we go. What a perfect trio to end on. Guys, thank you so much for joining me this evening, this afternoon, this morning, whatever time it is for you. And special thanks to all our listeners as well for joining us on this live podcast. I hope you've enjoyed it. It's not going to be the last one from us, so please do stay tuned for more. If you think of any more questions, just tweet them to us, #GiantTalk, or alternatively, give us a call. Drop me an email, lawrence@therebegiants.com, and we'll be more than happy to chat to you. Most importantly, stay home, stay safe, look after yourselves, look after your families. And this has been the first live podcast brought to you from There Be Giants alongside Koan, the awesome dedicated OKR software. And we all look forward to chatting to you next time. Thanks, everybody.